Tabletopped will start after the following messages.
When four strangers meet for the first time, they unknowingly begin to unravel tightly kept secrets about their worlds. This place sucks. This realm sucks.
I don't mean to interrupt, but maybe speak about portals a little quieter?
You know how some people aren't really into science and magic mixing together?
That's just a story. Portals haven't existed for hundreds of years.
Armed with little true knowledge, but unfathomable curiosity, these four strangers set out in search of answers and form an unlikely bond.
I do see you, and I'd like to think that I'll be there when you're ready to talk about it.
He kind of relaxes for the first time around the group.
You keep putting yourself in danger for others, but who puts themselves in danger for you?
Join Ivy, Varys, Alara, and Ziva as they dive headfirst into the unknown. Follow us at Rainbow Dice Club on your favorite streaming platform, and find us at Rainbow Dice Club wherever you get your podcasts. Do you trust me?
Welcome back to another episode of Tabletop. Today, I have someone who hasn't been on the podcast in a little while, but you know him, you love him. It's Mac!
Oh, everybody knows and loves me, Nick.
I'm so glad that you came in today because we are going to be talking about, it's the holiday season. It's time for people to consider maybe gifts, things like that. And there's no one better than Mac to talk about board games and things to get the gamers in your life. So I want to get a little bit away from TTRPGs just for a second and talk about our sister genre, the board game.
The humble board game. Its natural environment.
Yes, on the shelf with the books. So today we are going to talk about specifically epic length games. So this is like longer, more complicated board games for that person who's really into that, and also maybe some more casual like party games, things like that we suggest that you might want to add to your collection this holiday season. So, Mac, start us off. Where do you want to start? Party games, longer games, more complicated?
I'll start with epic, more complicated games. I think that's a good place to go to.
Hell
yeah. Nick and I, we played this game once, and because it's so long.
Yeah.
Which is the Dune board game, which has really been
so
out.
Fun.
It's
so
fun. It's been out since I think the original edition of it was from the 80s.
Yeah. They did some updates to the new version, though, right?
They did. Yeah, they made some updates in the new version. The main thing about this game is that a lot of these epic games, if you look at something like Rising Sun, for example, which is one of these big, epic Kickstarter games that I also only ever played once. That, it has 1 million minis, dudes on a board, craziness. That game is I don't know what's going for retail right now, but it's easily, it must be over $100. Yeah. It has to be.
But Dune just came out again, so with the reprint, it lowered prices drastically.
It's $40.
Yeah, it's awesome.
It's so inexpensive. And you can find it on sale all the time. It plays up to 6 players.
And also we played with all 6, right?
We did.
Which was a absolute blast.
Yes.
Like that. This is a game that you want to you clear a day, you get some friends over, you order some food or whatever, and you just sit down and play this game all day.
And now, a lot of people will, and I think that Dune places itself in a really interesting spot because one, it's a licensed thing off of a really popular book series, not to mention the new movies that are coming out. And so it's pretty relevant. Yeah. It's inexpensive. And also, you can more easily drag people in to play it with you.
Yeah, but there's just some cultural relevance there.
Right, there's cultural relevance, and I think that it really places itself in a really interesting place as compared to things like Rising Sun, things like Twilight Imperium.
I was about to say that.
Yeah, because Twilight Imperium is just if you ask anybody that plays these long epic games, there are people that only play Twilight Imperium, and that is their thing. And I think that Dune and Twilight Imperium actually take the same space on a shelf. itself.
Yeah.
It's just that Dune is a quarter of the size and price.
Yeah.
Um,
But also, like this, I was going to say this to Dune's favor is that it's way easier to learn, in my opinion.
is it really? Yeah,
Like,
you felt that way?
For me, well, I guess here's the thing is that like Twilight Imperium, every time I've almost started to play it, someone's been like, okay, and now we'll spend the next like hour teaching you the rules.
Yeah.
And then we'll play. We probably won't get to the end because we're going to spend all that time with the rules. And I was like, oh my God.
Yeah.
But Dune, like we watched a quick video.
Yes,
we got
did.
in and then we sort of decided on our factions and we kind of, we knew how to play because we all are board gamers. But like I had watched that video on my way to your house
Right.
kind of thing and had felt comfortable enough to just start playing, which
Right.
was really nice.
Yeah, so I think that if you're looking for like a long epic game that is like, you know, in the price range of a gift for, you know, like I don't know if anybody else's family does this, but it's like the siblings get each other gifts,
Yeah,
and they're
totally.
a little less expensive than the gifts that parents or guardians get. So it's that kind of thing, right? Where it's like if you have a board gamer person in your life that likes these epic games, doesn't have Dune yet, it's so easy to get, and then also just be aware that if you get it for them, you're just gonna probably have to play it with them.
I would also say the thing that Dune has too is that it is asymmetrical, so you basically can play it 6 times and have a new experience every single time.
Cool.
Yeah, and also it has, I think, really brilliantly built into the different factions a skill like kind of exponential skill
floor,
yeah,
skill
exactly. Where like the one I played, which was the Empire,
the Empire.
basically my whole deal was just using my vast resources to buy and send men down to the planet as quickly as possible to hold territory. But like you had like a completely different win condition and like way of play, which
I was playing the Atreides, and a fun thing about this is a really fun thing about Dune is no one in the game can take notes.
Yeah.
Except for Atreides.
Yeah, and there's also like you can look at top cards and stuff like that.
Yeah, so I get to know like what's going on with the auction.
Yeah.
So like the game really happens in like a bunch of different phases, but mainly it's like an auction game.
Yeah.
Mixed with a dudes on a board game that is really under this umbrella of this like political game.
Yeah, and the thing that I also really like about it is that man, each of the factions feel like what you would expect out of the like the Harkonnen. The Harkonnen they just start as a military badass.
Brutal. They're absolutely
brutal. But they can't really resupply themselves once their supply lines are cut. So that's like feels very like them. And then like the Empire feels very much like a distant power, just like sending invaders down. And like Atreides is super like kind of under resourced, but like using their information networks and
that's
like
all
there's
information. And then the what is it? The Fremen, like
the
they
Fremen
can't
are
show
so
up. They're
cool.
so good.
Yeah, they're so
can't
powerful.
show up on every part of the planet, but where they come in masses from the underside, like the southern side of the planet.
Yeah.
And then what is it? Oh, the Spacing Guild is actually really easy to pick up and play for your friend that doesn't play board games. Because if nobody wins,
they win.
They win.
And also, you can always like make an alliance so you both win. But the thing about it was like I allied with him for a while, this guy who's playing the Spacing Guild, Greg, and then eventually he was like, sorry, but I'm gonna start allying myself with this other person because if we both keep up, we probably would win together, but I think I can fuck this other guy over and win by myself.
Yeah, that was funny. That was
so.
Really
Dune is great. Is there any sort of like downsides to Dune for people?
Yeah, I mean, it's just like any epic long game. It's really heavy. I will say the price point, you get what you pay for.
Yeah.
So it's a board, it's a bunch of cards, and all of the dudes, like in the dudes on a board game, are represented by these tiny little colored cardboard discs.
Yeah.
They're very inexpensive to make, clearly, which is good. It keeps the price point low, and you can always, that this person in your life, if they're really into board games, if they end up playing this game a lot, there are a lot of like substitutes out there that they can get an upgrade for themselves.
Yep.
And because they didn't pay for the game, that's a much easier pill to swallow.
Yeah.
And they'll be grateful to you just because it just takes up so much less space on the shelf. But I would say, it's easier to learn than like a Twilight Imperium.
Yeah.
I would say it's a little harder. It's definitely harder to learn than like a Root or one of these more accessible asymmetric games.
Yeah, I will say the other problem with getting this epic long game as like you said with any epic long game, is that you are going to require buy-in from the people who want to play it with you. So if you're like someone who you're like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to find like 2 to 3 other people who would be interested in this, maybe stay away.
You need at least. I mean, it's best with 6.
Yeah, it's
it really
so
is.
good
And
with 6.
I think maybe you need I think 3 is the minimum. I wouldn't play it with any less than 4.
Yeah, because you really need the dynamics of the different factions like gunning off each other for it to be really interesting.
It really matters.
I will also say one thing about this game is that when we played it, we had one of our members got kind of fucked really early on never recovered. And so was basically out of the game at like an hour and a half. To be fair, part of that was misplay. Like he sort of took some really big risks that did not pay off for him. But on the other side, it was just like if you're playing a game with someone and you know that these like your friends are gonna be upset if they are out of the game, then this is also something to consider.
Yeah, and the win conditions are a little tricky at times too. The main thing about Dune, which I've heard a lot of reviewers and other people say too, is that like our game went on for 6 hours. Yeah, it really was like an all day affair. Like we broke for lunch. We like made a whole thing of it. Dune can last an hour.
Yeah.
If someone's like really good and gets lucky and knows like what they're doing more than everyone else, you can be like, great guys, let's put aside our whole day.
Yeah.
And then, someone wins in an hour and then you're like, well, do we have time to play again? And it's like, probably not.
Yeah.
So that's a thing in like a lot of these epic multiplayer games. I mean, hey, at least with Twilight Imperium, you're going to be there all day.
Yeah, exactly.
But I would rather have the chance of being done earlier, and then you can always play a fun party game after.
Exactly, yeah. So that is a really good, I think, kind of review of the Dune board game. Get it if you would like on Amazon. Like Max said, it's pretty cheap, but you can also find it at your local game store.
There's also a special edition at Barnes & Noble that comes with like a little extra. Yeah, it has a sandworm mini. It's never used in the game.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if you like the possibility of causing nuclear explosions and stuff, like this game is awesome. It's very fun.
It's very fun.
So I'm gonna jump in with another game that is on the cheaper end of the epic playing games, but this one can be broken down a little bit so it becomes a little bit more accessible, I think. King's Dilemma. We've both played King's Dilemma. It's on Amazon right now for like $59.
Is it really?
Yes.
That's a very good deal.
It is very, very good. It's very high quality. It is basically a political negotiation game where all of you are given houses of this kind of fiefdom or the kingdom, and you are all like kind of ducal or marquis houses.
Think Game of Thrones, but good.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it's very much like you make up the King's Council and you all have different objectives. One of my favorite parts about this game is that you're collecting both renown and infamy, I think, or like honor and infamy.
It's Crave is the bad one.
Yeah.
And I think it's renown. I think is the good one.
And also, but Max says bad one, it doesn't tell you what these things do until the very end. And also like it's just basically the only thing you know about it is that Crave is basically like selfish actions.
You get it from being selfish.
Yeah, exactly. And then in some houses really like lean into that because that's where you can get your engine really running. Yeah. But man, this game was so much fun.
It was so fun.
Yeah, and you can, if you have like some theater people in your lives or people who are into role playing, like this is the game because you can get so into your house's like character, and the house will say like you're like Anthony's house was, you're like the religious like theocracy backbone of this empire. You worship like this matronly like god, and like you're into no new knowledge because you want to maintain control. And our friend Anthony just like was like the cult of the mother, like super into it, and like would act out this sort of insane
this whole cult about like he made it all about milk in a really disturbing way. That was it was so funny.
Yeah.
And then who was I? I was the evil house.
Yeah. You were one of the you were like basically the mercenary group on the borderlands that had gained enough power to become like a house.
I was just the bad guy.
Yeah, you were like
I don't care about anybody.
You were like, absolutely, I do not give a shit if the king is overthrown. Like, it's totally
in fact,
fine.
It's better for me if the king is overthrown often because it's chaos.
Yeah, exactly. And you're like, I live off chaos.
Who were you?
I was the Artisans Guild, essentially, that were like, hard work makes a good life. But the other thing is that all of these houses have secret objectives. Like, my objective in like my house was like, you are a staunch, like, hardworking house, but secretly, all of you you are trying to figure out how to prolong your lives
Right.
because you want to enjoy the fruits of your labor. So it's like my secret objective was figure out a way to live forever. And
Yeah.
you're like, what does that even mean?
Yeah,
but it
you already
always
know.
makes itself kind of apparent through the cards.
It does.
And there are a couple of red herrings throughout that are fun. And basically events are coming up through drawing these cards and you are solving them as a group, trading favors and making political decisions.
Yeah, if you're the kind of like board gamer or like role player that loves like any game that any kind of game that has like an event deck,
Yeah.
you know, then you're gonna love this game
Yes.
because the whole game is draw a card from an event deck,
Yeah.
read 2 options, and vote on those 2 options.
Very simple.
And that's it.
Yeah.
like that really, it's very simple.
Yeah. And you're, excuse me, and you are basically running through generations each round. Like a round lasts about a half hour to an hour.
Yeah, I would say so.
Which is like essentially a king's lifespan,
Yep.
depending on if he's deposed or not. And you are making these decisions. And then at the end of the round, you can just like pack up and be like, okay, guys, see you next week kind of
Yeah.
thing. You could do it that way. But if you want to play through the whole thing, I would say it takes like 2 sessions of like 6 hours.
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, we played. Oh,
Was it
man.
3 or?
I think we played 3 or 4 times.
Yeah.
And we played 2 or 3 games each time.
Yeah.
And it took us like 2 to 3 hours,
Yeah.
I think. So I think the whole thing
Yeah.
is probably like 12 to 15
Yeah.
hours of gameplay, which like compared to like, I mean, Twilight Imperium to play 1 game
Yeah.
is like, what, 6 to
Mhm.
8 hours?
Yeah. And this is, so it's much more manageable if you want to break it up, if you don't have a
Yes.
group that wants to play for that long. Also, I would say that there is a secret card under the, like if you pull everything out of the box, under the like little plastic container, there's a secret card that kind of changes the game. So it does have some replayability.
Yeah, and you have to, you just like take it out. You know,
Yeah.
like sorry for the spoiler, I guess, but
Yeah.
like there's nothing in the game that indicates that.
Yeah.
And if you don't play a lot of these kind of games, you wouldn't know to look.
Yeah.
So like just get it.
Just grab it so that you don't like not have this option.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool. It includes sort of like a zombie-esque sort of
Yeah.
factor into the game, which is interesting. And also Queen's Dilemma is coming out. So if you're interested in sort of this type of game, you can try this one, be like, man, that was bomb as shit. And then you can buy Queen's Dilemma when
Yeah.
it's out.
The only thing that I'll say, like, just to be wary of with the King's Dilemma is there are some heavy themes.
Yeah.
There are some really heavy themes.
Mhm.
So if the people in your group aren't cool with that, that's fine. They're all handled really well.
Yeah, totally.
I
There's
think
like refugees.
yes.
There's also like sort of political cruelty in that like there's options to depose people in sort of brutal ways, but there's also like at one point I remember this was a very funny part in our game, but there's a card that we drew that was like, some of your scholars have figured out how to turn blood into gold.
Yep.
What do you want to do? And it was like, uh-oh.
Yeah, and of course I was like, yeah, give me gold.
Yeah,
Let's
like
turn
I
the
have
blood into gold.
Yeah, I have like a lot of a poor population. I can make a lot of money, and I was like, that's not hard working.
Yeah, there was also the one that was like, hey, we found a way to genetically engineer
Yes.
killer wasps.
So funny.
And I was
my-
like, of course we're gonna do that.
You and Armando, one of our other friends, was like, yeah, let's totally do this. This will like protect the borderlands, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, you are genetically engineering killer wasps. How many wasps have you known to be able to be controlled in any way?
I was like, I don't know, not many, but I don't care.
Yeah, it was very, very fun.
It's very fun.
Has some heavy themes, like Max said, though.
Yeah, and there's also like a lot of, I mean, you can't replay the box
Yeah.
because it's a legacy game. It gets ripped up a
Yeah.
little. But there is a lot of different options for the houses you can pick.
Yeah.
I think it caps out at 4
Mhm.
players, but there must be like 8 houses.
Yeah, totally.
So you won't even see half of them.
Yeah.
So you could play it again
Yeah.
and have a totally different experience.
Yeah, I would say that if you are going to try to make this a replayable game, you just have to be careful about, because it will, like Max said, tell you to rip stuff up or like to kind of get rid of cards. Just save them and you can play it again. I would also say that once you kind of know how the ending is scored, it will change sort of your outlook on the game.
Oh yeah.
So
Which is kind of fun though.
Which is fun, yeah.
It's not terrible to have like a meta lens. One of my favorite moments in this whole game. I'm not going to spoil anything about the ending. Nick pulls me in the hallway and he goes, "All right, we're gonna ally on this choice. But if you fuck me, I'll never forgive you." And I got to tell you, Nick probably has still never forgiven me.
Yeah,
because
that was
I
such
did fuck him.
And the thing that it was like, there was a glint in your eye where I was like, this motherfucker. Like I didn't have any other options, so that you were in total rights to do what you did. But I was like, this motherfucker.
Yeah, I was like, oh, okay, so I hold all of the cards and I can do whatever I want. Okay,
Exactly.
I will.
It's a very fun game if you have people who are like wanting to do that sort of wheeling and dealing.
Yeah.
Very, very fun. All right. Let's do one more. I have one. Do you have one?
Epic Games?
Yeah.
Why don't you go for it?
Well, I was thinking like it's sort of on the verge of not being an
Okay, what do
epic
you think?
game. Nemesis.
Okay, yeah, Nemesis is. I would say Nemesis for most people is an epic game.
Yeah, it's definitely a 3 to 4 hour game.
Yes.
But it is consistently I would even say if you're really good, maybe a 2 to 4 hour game if like the actual pace of play picks up.
Right.
It's complicated. It has beautiful minis.
It's
and
so cool.
It's high production value. It is like $120 bucks.
Expensive.
Yeah, but if you're into like painting minis and all that, and you can use them for your TTRPG games, they're very cool. It is essentially Alien the board game, where you wake up in the middle of this ship from cryostasis, and there's a dead ship person in the room, and you have to explore the ship. On one side of the ship there is the navigation, so you have to send someone out there to check where the ship is heading, and then you also have to head to the engines on the other side of the ship to make sure that they're all are functioning, because you don't know why you were woken up out of stasis. As you move throughout the board, you're generating noise, and if people generate too much noise, then the aliens that have infested the ship will start popping out and killing people. It is such a good game. It's so good. My favorite part about it is that everyone at the very beginning is given 2 cards. They're objective cards. One is like, I guess, a little bit more social, which is something like, together with your comrades, explore the ship and find out what happened here. The other one is from the corporation that can be something like, make sure player 2 does not survive.
Yeah.
And once the first alien shows itself, you have to pick one of these objectives. And dude, it is so good, because then you have no idea which one of your friends are actively going with you or not. So like if you're doing something like with the rest of the group and someone says like, yep, the navigation's totally fine, everything's set, you have to make a judgment call on whether they're just lying to you and they're about to send you to deep space or whatever.
And it really does play like that. Like it does the alien fantasy. It really does.
Mm-hmm.
Of
so thematic.
Because like the first time we played, we were like, okay, well, if I have to be selfish, then I'm not going to help people.
Yeah.
And then it's like we all died.
Yeah.
All of us died.
Yeah.
And it was just game over.
I've played this game 3 times now. Only once did anybody win.
Yeah.
Every single other time.
And that was because we were like sacrificing ourselves to make one person win.
Yeah, it's very much like if you guys are gonna all be going for yourself. Like Armando chose to like take the corporation card at one point, and we kind of realized it like 2/3 of the way through the game, and we were like, fuck, we're all fucked. But then he was like generating so much noise trying to stop us from doing our stuff that he kind of trapped himself.
He got himself killed.
Yeah, and he got ripped apart by aliens.
Which is such a cool thing.
Yeah, it's like such part of the movie.
Yeah, this is definitely one of those games too where, you know, it's like that scene in Alien where it's like you're running down the corridor and it's like, okay, get to the escape pods. And you're like, I'll hold them off. And then you hear like the sound of the escape pod door closing and your friend is just leaving in the escape pod. You're like, no.
Yeah, because that's like part of the game is that you can close doors on people and break them and stuff like that. You also, there's so many different win conditions. Like the best one for everybody is, hey, you're going to Earth, the engines are set, and you basically go back into cryosleep before you do this warp jump, which will just like kill everybody if they're still out of the thing, because it throws you against the side of the ship. But there's also like, the ship is about to explode, get to the escape pods. There's also like, you gotta get enough of the alien genome into the health pod so that you can study it enough that you know how to fix this problem. Yeah. Like there's like, it's so different every single time.
It's expansive, it's so replayable, and there's now like 2 different versions of the game, right?
Yeah, because like they have an expansion set that is its own standalone game. But it comes with, because you have classes, like there's the soldier, there's the scout, there's like a bunch of different classes that you can play, so replayability there. But then with the new stuff, you can also play as the alien. They have new classes.
Yep.
Tons of cool stuff. I will say a little hard to learn the pace of play.
Yep.
Your first few times, it's going to take the full 4 hours probably, because you're learning how to do it.
And each room is like in the spaceship is a individual thing that has its own rules about it. That's, I'll say, the fiddliest, and maybe it's the worst part of the game for me.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, if this is the worst part of the game, pretty good game. But it's like, you do need like a reference sheet for every room.
Yep.
And the game comes with one of them.
Yes.
So if you're playing with 4 players, it's like, just put that thing in the copier and maybe give everybody a copy.
Yeah,
could
absolutely.
Be good, you know?
It's I would say it's a really great value for what you get. You get quite a few miniatures. Like this amount of miniatures from like a GW game would fully be $300. Just for the minis. Just for the minis. So like
beautiful board.
Yeah, it's really high quality.
Double-sided too. Yeah. So like 2 different kinds of ship. More characters than you can play in one playthrough, I think.
Yep. And then also all of the rooms are like hex discs that you put into the board. So the ship is different each time. So it's very, very replayable, very cool. It's like a deduction game, again, a very social game, which we tend to like. It's just long. It can be a little fiddly at points. And also most of the time no one is going to win, which can with certain groups feel bad.
Yeah, you need to have people that are like interested in the narrative of the thing. But also it's a weird game because it's like you really have to, I think, prep people on like sometimes you have to do what you need to do to survive.
Yeah.
And it might seem like you're going against your objective, but like if you're dead, you can't do your objective at all.
Yeah.
So, you know.
Exactly. And the thing about it too is like the social like responsible objectives, I guess, which it like requires the whole crew, will require everybody working together to help each other try to get their thing done and then get back to the cryopods.
Yeah.
It is pretty much impossible to do it on your own.
Yes.
Whereas the corporation ones you can do on your own. Like you can make sure that one person dies kind of thing.
That's very easy.
Or you can go sabotage the engines or anything. Just know that like when you make that choice, you are making a very distinct choice to go against all the other players as well. And like there is no friendly fire, but you can lock doors with a person and an alien in a room, or you can like set a room on fire or throw a grenade in, not caring about somebody. Like there are ways to do really terrible shit to each other. But I remember the one where we won, I think, where it was essentially all 3 of us trying to get into the cryopods, and 2 of us had to sacrifice ourselves to keep this alien at bay so that one person could keep trying to get in. Eventually did, and then the ship went and like everyone died. Except for the person in the cryopod.
It was like I know I'm not that kind of person that's gonna be like, well, I didn't get my objective.
Yeah, it was.
I didn't stay alive.
We all like stood up and were like, yeah,
because we got one person. Because the game is hard.
It's so hard. Yeah.
The one thing I would say is don't. There's a whole thing in the game where if someone dies, they can play as the alien.
Yeah,
don't do it.
Don't do it.
It makes because it's already too hard.
Yeah.
It just means that everyone dies. Like, and it keeps that person engaged. But it's like if that person is running the game, you know, is now like
that's what we decided to do. Yeah. Anytime that someone like died off or whatever, it would be like, okay, facilitate the game.
Yep.
You're still involved, and like. Because otherwise
enough.
This is gonna you're gonna spend all your time just doing that, and it will be so helpful. So that would be my last pick for an epic length. Do you have anything else before we head to a break?
No, let's head to the break.
All right, we'll be back right after these messages. Hey everyone, it's me, Nick, from the Tabletop Podcast. When I'm not hosting, I'm thinking about ways to create a better podcast for you guys, and I think I landed on something pretty fun. In fact, if you go to our Patreon at patreon.com/tabletop and join for as little as $1 a month, you can get access to a new episode a month that we're going to start putting out. In fact, we're going to be calling this one Wild Magic, I think, in that we're going to talk about anything and everything that interests us, not just TTRPGs, though there will be a lot of that. It is truly unhinged, and if you are a fan of the podcast and all of the hosts, you're definitely going to want to be on it. We're thinking of dropping these at the end of each month, so join our Patreon today. That is patreon.com/tabletop. Oh, and there's going to be so much more coming out in the new year there, so don't miss it. Sign up today. Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Tabletop. We're doing a holiday game guide. We're talking about board games specifically with one of my best friends, Mac, right here.
It's me again.
Right before the break, we talked about epic length games, but now we're going to shift a little bit to talk about party games, things that people can play with a little less stress. Someone you're trying to get into board games, perhaps, who doesn't have a whole lot of experience with them. This is really kind of the opposite from what we talked about before the break. But in my opinion, there's a whole lot of party games. Some of them are not fun at all, and some of them are actually really solid games. So let's get started. Do you have one in your brain that you're like, this is it?
Oh man, yeah. I mean, so if we're talking like the big party, like I think that I would break party games up into like, this is a game that if you have 6 people for a game night and they're not like game
Gamers,
people you play with, this one you can actually play at a party, which is Wavelength.
Yes.
Have you played Wavelength, Nick?
I have. It's very good.
So good.
I thought you were going to say a different game, actually.
Really?
Yeah, I thought you were going to do the letter one that we've played a few times.
Letter Jam?
Letter Jam
Letter
so good
Jam
as well.
is not actually a party game because you
really?
can only play it with like 5 or 6 people.
Gotcha.
But that's also, I mean, that could also be on the list. We'll talk about that in a second.
Yeah, but let's talk about Wavelength.
So,
Hit us with it.
Yeah, Wavelength is like, okay, so the whole thing with Wavelength is it really is more of a kind of social experiment than it is a game.
Mm-hmm.
It's the kind of game where it's like, you will stop counting points pretty quickly, and everyone will just be enthralled with the idea of the thing.
Yeah.
So the whole thing works on a spectrum, and the spectrum does not have like numbers on it or anything.
Yeah.
It is just about like where you place things on a spectrum. So the spectrum that someone is given might be like hot, cold.
Yeah.
And then they randomly get assigned where on the spectrum they need to get people to guess. So, the area, so it's like, there's a small area that gets a lot of points, and then there's a bigger area that gets less points.
Yeah.
And the people that are on this person's team are going to be trying to set this dial to where they think it is on the spectrum. Of course, they can't see where the area is. So if the highlighted section's at the very bottom of hot, cold, Nick, what would you say for that?
Freezing. Or sorry, hot, cold?
Hot, cold.
Boiling.
Boiling?
Sure.
Okay, so if you were going to say boiling and you wanted them to hit the very top of the spectrum, right?
Or
I might think to myself, well,
the
boiling,
sun is hotter.
The sun is way hotter than that.
Yeah.
So, okay, if the sun is hotter than boiling, relatively to a lot of things, boiling is actually not that hot, but it's definitely not super cold. So it's like, would I go in the middle then?
Yeah.
When you meant to go all the way to the end? This is the whole game.
Yeah.
Like, that's it, right? Where it's like, and there's a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff in there about, like I think there's, like, capitalism, socialism.
Yeah.
There's like lots of different like fun little things and then like of course when you reveal like what the actual spectrum was and where it was, everyone inevitably looks at the person that said the thing and like, really?
Yeah, it's very much like sort of group code names.
It is.
Yeah,
yes,
which is
I
very
think it's
fun.
way more fun.
Yeah, me too. I really like it.
Less rules. Like it's so easy to understand. The cards are so cool. You can come up with your own spectrums.
Yeah.
It has a super cool production.
Yeah.
It like sits in the box.
Yeah.
And it has like a fancy like little dial thing that you move, and it's like it's very chic.
Yeah.
It looks very nice.
What is like what will this run you on, a Walmart, a Amazon?
I don't know, $40 to $60.
Yeah. It's pretty easy.
Less. Yeah. It's a fairly big box because the box is like the board.
Yeah.
But it's not too big.
To me, this is like the gateway to get them into more high touch games because it feels way more production value and more like interesting to me than a Codenames or like a Sorry or whatever, but it also isn't like the rules mechanics. Like you're not building like an engine, or it's not a deck builder or anything where you really have to think about the game. It's much more like, this is the rule. You can customize it as much as you want. It's going to be different every time you play because the people you play with, very, very fun.
Yeah.
And on this note, I actually want to give one that's very similar, which is Hues and Cues.
Oh, yeah. Tell me about that. So I haven't played this one.
Yeah. Hues and Cues, I would say if you're looking for a cheap game to just have in your house for parties, this one will run you like $20. It's really good. The production value is good for what it gives you, which is essentially a really beautiful board that is a spectrum of color. So if you're colorblind or have trouble differentiating between colors, this one's going to be a hard one for you. But it basically goes from one side of the color spectrum all the way to the other. And then there are essentially a deck of cards that has every point on the board, all of the different color squares on them. And there's 4 per card. So the person who's the cue giver will draw a card, choose one of the colors, and then gets one word to try to get everyone to guess what color it is. And you can't say like blue, but you can say stuff like turquoise or fuchsia or whatever.
Right, you can't say any like blue, green, yellow, red.
And then you can also not say like left, higher, lower, or anything like that. Because you also get a second round where you can use 2 words. But it leads to some fun stuff. Like someone was like blood, and then we all like placed, and then was like anemic blood. To try to get like a lighter color.
That's funny.
But it's very fun because then after everyone makes their guess, you have this little rectangle that is a score box that you then put with the center on the color. And anyone in the middle of the score box, the cue giver gets points for that, but so does the other people.
Oh, cool.
And then anyone on the direct outside of the box also gets less points, but gets a point. And then everyone else just is not, whatever.
Right.
But it's very fun, very hard because
really?
You can't use clues that have already been given. So as you play further on, you'll get clues that are both like kind of a fuchsia purple or whatever, and you're like, shit.
How long is that? Does the game go?
You can play as long as you want. The score card goes all the way up to 150, which is a lot of turns. I have never played past 25 points because that's like 45 minutes, and everyone's like, "That was a blast. I'm ready to stop."
Yeah. Well, it's like what is that? Like each person gets a chance to be the clue giver.
Yeah, like
once
twice. Yeah, maybe 3 times.
Cool.
But it is a blast. It also does that thing that you were talking about in Wavelength where somebody's like, Barney, and then you all place, and then everyone's like, that's what you were going for when you reveal it? Because also, like, it also reveals to you how little you actually remember what things colors are. Because, like, you can be like, Barney going for, like, a dark purple. Barney is almost pink. It is a...
Right?
Yes.
Weird.
Yeah, and you're like, how did I not remember? I actually deep dived this because of this game, trying to figure it out. It's because when they filmed it on actual film, which darkens all of the colors. So they had to have a really bright pink. But as they switched to digital, they kept the same costume. And so Barney went from, like, a darker purple to, like, a more fuchsia-y bright purple. And so it's fucked with everybody's heads.
That's so funny.
Yeah, but it's a very good game. A lot of laughs. Like, someone once was like, Rust, and everyone went really deep brown, and then someone was like, new Rust, and then everyone was like, I don't, and it was like a bright orange. So it gives like a lot of fun moments where people can like get mad at each other. It's just very fun. I like it. It's definitely worth the $20. If this is a sale that I found and it was on for $20 and it's more like a 60, I would definitely go for like a Wavelength or anything.
Yeah.
But for a really cheap buy-in to a game, this is great.
Especially for the person in your life that's like maybe a little more artistic.
Yeah.
Like that's nice.
Yeah. Like my fiance hates board games. She liked this game.
Oh,
she was great. Like, this is a fun game. Yeah. So any other party games?
I mean, we'll talk about Letter Jam.
Yeah.
Right? So we talked about it. So
Jam.
It's not really a party game, but it is, for me, the best word game.
Yes.
For me. So how the game works is there is a deck of cards, and each card has a letter on them.
Yeah.
And you'll take just a little stack of these cards, and out of those cards, you'll write a 5-letter word that you will then pass to the person to your left. So now everyone has a stack of cards that ostensibly spells a 5-letter word.
Yeah.
And they put their cards down in front of them in a line. So you have these 5 cards face down. There are these little stands that come with the game, and you'll take one of your cards so that you can't see it, but everyone else can.
Yeah. And
you'll flip that card up, and you'll put it in the little stand. So now you can see, like, person A has an L, and person B has an E, and person C has an A. I don't know. And then, there's some wild letters as well. And what you're doing is you are spelling and creating words with other people's letters.
Yes.
What this means is that Nick, if he had if I was spelling water and Nick had a T, and I went, okay, person 1, yours is the first letter, and they have the W. Person 2, yours is the second letter, so you just say it this way, so you don't give it away.
Yeah.
Nick, yours is the third letter. The other person, your E is the fourth, and then the R is the fifth. And then Nick is looking at his sheet of paper that he's writing this all down on. It has a really cool recording system that's really easy to understand. And he's looking at WA question mark ER.
Yeah.
And he's going, Mac, you fucked me.
Yeah.
Because that could be wager,
Yeah.
water.
And you don't think about
whaler,
this. Sometimes you're like, oh, I got a 4-letter or whatever. And you do like B blank LL. And you're like, is that Bill? Is that ball? Is that bowl?
Bell?
Yeah, it's like, it could be anything.
Is that
like,
bowl?
because when you like are looking at these letters, you're like, this is easy. Everyone's going to know this. And then you realize that it could be like 17 different words.
So you're really finding out through process of almost like elimination what your letters are. And then you have a certain number of turns where people give clues.
And you win as a team, which is very nice if you're looking for like a cooperative game.
Yeah.
The other thing that I really like about it is like the kind of deduction process can last multiple rounds. So like you can say, okay, this round, Nick, I am going to fuck you. I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
And then you like basically work on one player to get them to know what their letter is. But then like you have that word that you can write down and say, okay, so that will be reference for later when they give another word for me. And maybe I can cross-reference between these words and figure out what my letter is with like more certainty, which is really helpful.
Because it's like if I had been writing water and Nick's letter was T, and then later I come back to like trust is the word, and it's like, great, you're the first letter and the last letter, and in between it's R-U-S.
Yeah, it's like yes, and then you
it's
can
like
get it
it
that
can't
way.
really be anything else.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's another really great game.
It's so good, and it's cheap. It's really inexpensive. It's very fun.
It comes a little baggy, right? Like almost like a Bananagrams, or is it a box?
No, it's a box.
Okay.
So it comes with a box, and in the box is a deck of cards, the stands, some pencils, a pad of paper, and these beautiful poker chips.
Oh yeah, those are
that just have numbers on them.
They're nicely weighted. Ooh,
they're
nice.
weighted, and that's how you tell people which place in the word their letter is. So you hand them this beautiful chunky poker chip, and you put it in front of them so everyone else can easily look around. They really made a game that like is so counterintuitive. Yeah. Like the way that you have to think about it is incredibly counterintuitive, and they made it really easy to follow. Yeah. For some people, it doesn't work. Yeah. Some people, like, they cannot wrap their head around it. It's just one of those, like, you kind of have to, like, trick yourself into understanding it. Yeah. I've had some people, like, I got halfway through explaining it, and they're like, got it. No problem. Yeah. And then, like, we aced the game every time. I had some people, I played the game 3 times, and they were like, okay, so how do I give out the numbers again? Yeah. And these were people that, like, I've played D&D with for years that are very competent in role-playing games and complicated games, and just words are not their thing. Yeah. Yeah, it takes a certain type of person. For like the crossword person in your life, or like the New York Times game person. Moms love it.
Yeah, it's very much like a family game. If you're going home for the holidays and you're like, how do I interact with my family in a way that is not going to end up with me anxious? Like, this is a nice way to do that.
It's really good. Yep.
Any others that we want to mention before we shut down?
I don't know. How much more time do I have to talk about them?
You have another 10 minutes?
Another 10 minutes? Yeah. Okay, cool. I'm going to talk about Decrypto.
Yeah, okay.
So Decrypto is really good. Yeah. And it's better than Codenames. And I'll stand by this forever. Yeah. Okay, so Decrypto is really good. Basically what it is it's about decrypting like a word or phrase that someone gets, this like code giver gets, and really it's about every round you get a new one. So it's really about, there's open communication. Both teams are communicating at the same time and giving hints to each other openly. Yeah. And the whole thing is, can I get my team to guess what I'm going for without the other team guessing what I'm going for? So fun. And it's so hard. It's so much harder to do that because your team can see the words that you're trying to like relate to, and the other team can't. Yeah. So, but what they're trying to decrypt is the words that are related to each other. Yeah. So it's like you might have like the word, like one of the words that you have that your team can see is like basement. Yeah. Okay. I might put like creepy. Yeah. You know, if it can't be misconstrued for any of the other words that we have to guess, I might put creepy. And then they might say, great, that's our word number 1. Yeah. And they're like, yes. The other team is going, okay, so creepy is related to word number 1.
Yeah.
And then later I might say storage. And they might be like, okay, well, I think that's related to basement 2 of my team. And then the other team would be like, okay, creepy and storage.
Yeah, it could be, and then they could be like, maybe it's like a graveyard because, you know, like you start making.
Are they related?
Yeah, exactly.
Like those probably aren't related. And then if they guess, you know, they don't guess that they're related, then they don't get a point. And basically the game goes until a team, your team doesn't get what you're trying to get them to do twice.
Yeah.
Or the other team gets exactly what you were going for twice.
And everyone's making guesses at the end of the rounds, or?
Everyone's making guesses at the end of the rounds as a whole team. What's really fun about this game that I think I like the best is, so how it's set up is you have this beautiful little like cardboard computer thing set up in front of you and your team with 3 words that are revealed with that like red film with like the, I don't know what they're called. Yeah. The gobbledygook.
Yeah.
And then the other team has the same thing just facing them. And at the end of the game, if you tie, you have to guess what exactly those words were.
Yeah.
You're never, and it's, people get it more often than you would think. And so now me and my friends, whenever we play the game, even if there isn't a tie, we still guess because that's fun.
Yeah.
And it's just fun to be like, oh, like what were those words and all that stuff.
And it's like Codenames or Wavelength in the way that like if you choose the people who you play with enough, it can get really fun because you're like doing like inside references and you're
meta.
Exactly. It like there's the core game and then that's the expansion. It's like people being like salami, and then someone's like, oh, we had that like funny thing happen, so
about
maybe and that was at like the water park, so maybe it's a water park.
What are you doing with salami at a water park?
You know, who doesn't go to the water park with a
I gotta have a little snack for the lazy river.
Awesome. All right. Well, I think that this is a really great starter guide for folks who are both looking for like the intense gamer who's like ready to sit down for a full day, or maybe a group who wants to get into that sort of game. And then also for the opening novices who are like just wanting to get started, or something that you want in your house for when people come over. These are all great suggestions. And we will be back with more in another episode of Tabletop next week. Goodbye, everyone.
Bye-bye.